Hello everyone, welcome to episode 80 of Show for Viewers. Today we'll be going over season 1 of Baki Hanma. Now, this season of Baki really starts off kind of goofily, because I'll just say Baki's first two real opponents, very, very tough fights here. He starts off with a 12-year-old child, then the next one, praying mantis. But yeah, so I'm just gonna get the story. The intro, the opening of this one is obviously great, as all Baki openings are. Like, it's phenomenal. A really good song, and I've already started season 2, and the opening for that one's great too. But yeah, so we start off the season, and we see as Yujiro Hanma has taken down like some titanic elephant, and this is a way to indicate his acceptance of Baki's challenge to ultimately fight him. And then we see as we're going around Baki, and this elementary school has been challenged to go fight the strongest high schooler at this high school. And so they send him off, and he ends up going up there, and he's like, I want to fight, man. Send me to fight the strongest one here. And they're like, oh, little chump, we ain't the strongest. So they send him to meet Baki at like this river, and Baki just straight up hits this John. And ultimately, the kid's like, the kid's name is Rumina. And Rumina's like, that's when I became a man. I took a full-on hit from Baki Hanma, and Rumina ends up chilling around with him a little bit, and we see that what Baki was doing out there was he was catching a praying mantis, because he's discussing, he's like, okay, yeah, with all of the animals within the world, none of them are really strong, but when we look at bugs and their comparison of their body size to what they can move around, they are absurdly strong. He's like, praying mantises are technically some of the greatest biological fighters that exist at this moment. So he ends up briefly demonstrating to Rumina while out in the street one time his shadow boxing ability, because we've seen this prior, and we see that he is able to envision a opponent and actually like physically manifest into where they can do like damage to him and stuff like that. And we see him do this with a character in the Baki universe known as Iron Michael. Now this is obviously like a stand-in for Mike Tyson, but his name is not actually Mike Tyson, it's Iron Michael. But yeah, so we see this, and he's boxing him up, and then ultimately he ends up taking the praying mantis to this area and showing Rumina as he, I guess, astral projects this praying mantis into existence, and he makes it 200 pounds, like human size, and he ends up fighting him, and he ends up winning the fight. Yeah, so we see this, and he just kind of goes about doing this thing, and then the third episode gets even more wacky, because we see, okay, in preparation, after beating this 300-pound praying mantis, Stridum ends up informing Yujiro of this, and he's like, yeah, Yujiro's like, yeah, fighting a 200-pound mantis isn't nothing compared to the real thing. He just might as well just be like beaten up on like a I think it's just a puppy or something like that. But yeah, so we see this, and then after that we see that Baki is wanting to have more training before he goes and fights Yujiro. So he gets the good idea. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna capture the president, buddy. So he goes and kidnaps George W. Bush, Little Bush, and he's like, all right, I captured you because I want to go to prison. He wanted to go to the Black Pentagon. Now, the normal Pentagon, also known as the White Pentagon in this universe, is the Pentagon we know, like the one that got hit in the 9/11 attacks and all that, the one where the Department of Defense and everything is there. And so that is the White Pentagon, but the Dark Pentagon, or the Black Pentagon, is the White Pentagon. That's what that one's called. The Black Pentagon is Arizona State Penitentiary. Now, this is where Biscuit Oliver himself is residing. That's why Baki wanted to go there. He wanted to fight off Biscuit. So he ends up going, and ultimately he's not allowed to fight Biscuit at first, because Biscuit's like, yo, I'm not going to fight you unless you become the second strongest around here. So Baki ends up going and living his own little prison life for a little bit, and we get to see that he's in a cell with the second strongest. Now, this guy who he first meets, his name is Kent, is not actually the second strongest. So we go and see him going about for a little bit, and ultimately the second strongest ends up coming out of the locker that's in here, and his name is Che Guevara. Not Che Guevara, like the revolutionary, but Che Guevara. And Che Guevara is very similar to Che Guevara in almost every facet, but he's not the same character. But yeah, so we get introduced to Che Guevara, who's actually the second strongest in the Black Pentagon. So we see as kind of things play out. We don't really get too much backstory on him until after like this first couple events. But we see as Baki is like preparing to eventually challenge him, which he actually never actually gets to fight Che Guevara. But yeah, so we see then as he's kind of chilling in the cafeteria, he's kind of like eyeing him up and all that, and we see as a dude, like a big like sumo wrestler dude, ends up sitting across from Che Guevara, ultimately ends up challenging him to a fight, and we see this fight play out, and ultimately Jay quickly disemples this guy by removing like hairs from his head, twisting them up, puncturing his eardrum, and then just throwing heads at him after that. He messes with his cochlea and all that. Like he gets through the hammer anvil stirrup, the eardrum, everything. He messes with his cochlea directly. So that was not good for him. Obviously messed up his balance and his equilibrium. And so yeah, he ends up getting pieced up after that. So we see that Baki, after hearing about all this, realizes that yeah, he is a powerful fighter. But in this, Baki is just really cocky. I don't like when Baki's cocky, but I do like when he can back it up, because like most time when he is cocky, he can't back it up. But yeah, he's really cocky in this prison arc. But so we see this. That was a but we see this. But yeah, so we see as he ends up beating him, and then we also get some more background information because, like I said, Iron Michael, which Baki actually meets in prison, is still alive, and he is in this prison. And we see as before, this is before Baki actually ends up going to the cell and meeting Jay Guevara. He's talking with Iron Michael, and he's like, "Yo, are you the second strongest here?" And he's like, "No, man, I'm not even in the top 10. I don't care about that ranking stuff." And so we see this goes along, and ultimately we see as Iron Michael's time to leave prison is slowly growing near. And so we know that because of there's like some lore, some boxing lore, something like the champion in the heavyweight class who before Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali was a criminal, and this led to mass outrage in like the fighting bracket and all that. So the people of like the higher ups didn't want this to happen again. They didn't want an undefeated heavyweight who was a criminal to come back into his position and reign over. So we see as the warden is paid off like $2 million to make sure that Iron Mike does not end up leaving the Arizona State Penitentiary. So we see as he sends this group of triplets after them called the Mouth. And they are called the Mouth because they have individual names of the lips, the teeth, and the tongue. And this is because they act in such close collaboration, cohesion, that they are essentially like the Mouth. And so we kind of see as they like I guess mesh sentences together and all that. Like they speak very cool in the series because they like complete each other's sentences, but it flows so smoothly and all that it's really cool. But yeah, so we see this and they're sent after Iron Michael. So they end up going to meet up with Iron Michael, and yes, they are amateur fighters. However, because of their cohesive nature and how well they work together, they're able to easily beat Iron Michael. And then we see as after he's beaten, we see as Jay Guevara comes in like rolling like that on his head. He rolls and eventually hits the wall. So he now challenges him to a fight, and he absolutely embarrasses them. He's able to break up their cohesion. He ends up urinating on one of them, and this messes up their cohesion even more. And we see he's finally fighting, and he beats them with like relative ease. And now ultimately they end up getting like this difficult formation. It's like a triangular shape with all that, and he's like, you know what? I'm still gonna beat you with this. So he ends up putting like dirt on his face to make like this cool like tribal marking looking thing almost, and he then ends up easily beating them. But yeah, so I guess I'll kind of go over Jay Guevara's like backstory a little bit. So Jay Guevara was a pirate from his youth, and he grew up on a pirate ship, just being a pirate and all that. And ultimately, he ended up on an island. This island had about, as they say, 20,000 people. And he ultimately ended up becoming the leader of this island, in which he began to train many of the civilians in the nature of the martial arts and stuff like that. And so he makes like a bunch of essentially super soldiers to help him just make his nation strong. And ultimately, then he ends up striving for independence from the United States because this island is under the control of the United States. And during all of this, they do not give them independence. So what Jay Guevara ends up doing is he ends up sending his man to George Bush while he's in like a meeting or something like that, and he ends up showing George Bush a video of Jay Guevara at Bush's home, which for some reason isn't the White House in this, but I guess it's his actual home that he owns, and he is chilling with his like family and stuff like that. They're just chilling, like just talking, and it's just really goofy. So this is why Jay ultimately got sent to prison, to where he could fight Biscuit Oliver, because he wanted to fight Biscuit Oliver because he wanted to, I guess, assert his dominance over the Americans and show that they deserve independence. But yeah, so we know the reason why Jay is here. Jay is here to fight Biscuit as well, just like Baki. So after this, we just kind of see there's a little bit more exposition. We see as they talk and stuff like that, and ultimately, Biscuit and Oliver are set up to be in a match. Now, before this match, they have a brief discussion where they're talking about their reasons for fighting. We see that Jay fights for his nation, for his land, and Biscuit fights for his girlfriend. And we see his Baki as they like yammer about this, like almost in like a little cat fight. We see his Baki gets in between them. He's like, "Quit stop talking about these stupid reasons to fight," and they both like palm thrust him into like the wall, and he almost was falling off and all that. But yeah, also, I forget there was a brief stint where Baki was in solitary confinement for just being a little hoodlum, and he ended up saving a guard from falling off a ledge. But yeah, that wasn't really important for the story. But yeah, so after this, they ultimately arrange for their fight. Now we get to see Biscuit Oliver's girlfriend after this. Her name is Maria. Now Maria is a big girl, a very very big woman, but yeah, we just kind of see they talk briefly, and we see that Maria's a little bit of a, I guess, I don't really know how to phrase this. She's not uncouth. She's very free with how she talks. Like she doesn't care to hurt Biscuit's feelings or Oliver's feelings. I don't know. I keep calling him Biscuit, but I mean his name is Biscuit Oliver. But yeah, so this ultimately ends up leading to the fight between Jay Guevara and Biscuit Oliver, the Unchained. And we see as on the night before, we see that Jay Guevara ends up going to the locker, grabbing out a bottle. And this bottle, what it was one of the children on his island had one night when there was a storm. He had gone up there, held the bottle, and tried to trap the winds of the storm. And we see like a motif throughout all this of Jay getting his like power and inspiration from the wind. And this kid had given it to Jay just out of admiration and respect. So Jay ended up taking this to the battle with Biscuit. And Biscuit ends up taking his big old girlfriend to the battle by carrying her bed, dropping her down. Everyone sees the lovely nature of Maria. But yeah, so they start off this fight with a game called Lose or Lose. And it's where you have to hold on to the ends of a handkerchief by your hands. And whoever releases it first loses. And they lose their honor. And we see this goes on for a little bit, and they're just kind of not really getting anywhere. They kind of get you keep upping each other up. We see as Oliver goes from holding it like this to holding it like this to just doing what's called the Gilberto style, which was based off this old mafioso who ended up losing his life to the Battle of Lose or Lose because he was a scrawny old man. And he went up against the mafia, and the dude who was going against him just ended up killing him. But yeah, so we see this slowly progress, but Baki's getting tired of this. Baki's spectating in the yard, and he's like, "No, I don't want to do this anymore." So he ends up hopping into the bed with Maria and just kind of laying there, like, cuddling up with her, and this makes Oliver mad. And what he ended up doing while he was laying there was he ended up suggesting to Maria that, "Yo, y'all need to actually fight." So Maria ends up suggesting it to Biscuit, and Biscuit obviously like, "Yo, I'm going to do this." So we get to see Jay and Biscuit just show the straight dukes with each other. And it's a really cool fight. Like, great fight. And then we just kind of see after that ultimately Jay is beaten and defeated by Biscuit Oliver. And then we progress along a little bit more. So now that the number 2 is out of the way, it is now time for Baki to end up fighting Oliver. Now, after this, we see as Jay ultimately ends up escaping from the prison because he wanted to go back to his nation, and he didn't do it in a way to embarrass the guards because he could have easily done it anyway, but he did it in a manner where he escaped from the bottom of the locker and took his everything with him. And we then see as he left by a $100 note from his nation's economy to kind of tell people to kind of tell Baki and Oliver to come find him if they wanted to fight him again. So we see as he leaves and ends up going back there. We see as he lands on his island. There's some brief personal interactions. But now after this, it is time for Oliver and Baki to fight. Now before this, Baki ends up escaping from the prison and embarrassing the guards in any way possible, just to show that he can and show that he is truly unchained and it's not that hard to be unchained like Oliver is, so his title isn't that important. And this obviously outrages Oliver. And so Baki's ultimately ended up put back in solitary confinement. But during all this, we see that Oliver's growing slowly more and more angered by this. And he ultimately ends up going to the war, and he's like, "Yo, we're going to set up a fight between me and Baki." So the world's the strongest American and the strongest high schooler against each other. And so we see as he does this, and he goes to tell Baki about this, and Baki's like, I don't need no paid fight, I just want to fight you. So ultimately he ends up rage baiting Oliver to the point where they just straight up start fighting in the solitary confinement. We see as he legit throws Baki through like 3 walls. Not 3 walls, it's like 4 or 5 walls actually. And we then see ultimately as Baki, because how they have him chained in solitary is they have him by their thumbs like this on their back, and Baki ends up escaping from that, and then we get to see the fight commence. I know we see Baki doing pretty well at first, but he's not doing too much damage on Oliver. But ultimately, he ends up getting kind of knocked out by Oliver, and Baki has like this brief film where he's melting from his skin. But this is not him. He's actually just converting his back to the demon face, which we got to see briefly in 2018. And he does this, he rebounds, and Oliver's like, yeah, you might have that, but you know what I got? And then he curls into a ball, and this ball is a similar mechanic to what we see when Baki fights Koreha, and this is to essentially reflect the damage done by any attack from Baki. So Baki has faced this before, so he's like, you know what, I'm going to try the same thing, which is called like rigid style attacks or something like that. So he goes in to do this, and it ultimately fails against Oliver, and Oliver ends up consuming Baki. He ends up in his little ball, like dragging him in, and like like essentially doing absurd damage to him, and regurgitates Baki out, and Baki's like laying there. So then he goes for it again, and he gets eaten again. But then ultimately he ends up escaping from this, and then we get to see as Baki and Oliver have a little bit more of a scuffle, and then you know what, Baki was like, no, I'm not going to be able to beat you like this with your technique, so it's like, you know what, let's just throw straight dukes. And then we see as there's Iron Michael from the tops of the prison cells, who was in one of the solitary rooms that got busted up by Oliver and Baki, comes out. He's like, no, you can't do this. There's a reason why there's weight classes. He'll obliterate you. He's 200 pounds more than you, heavier than you. But ultimately, Baki's like, nah, this means I should do it even more. So him and Baki end up just getting right in front of each other and just blasting each other with their fists. And ultimately, he ends up pushing Oliver into a wall and breaks through it eventually. And ultimately, Baki is triumphant over Biscuit Oliver. And we just kind of see a brief time where after this, Oliver ends up going into the speech to the prison. He's like, yes, I did get beat by Baki, as you've probably heard from rumors so far. However, that does not mean I'm not the strongest here, as long as Baki leaves. So he makes Baki leave the prison, and Baki goes on his merry way out into the Arizona desert. But yeah, so that was all for season 1 of Baki Hanma. It was a really great season. It was only like 12 episodes, but the second season I believe is 27, so I'll have quite a bit more to review when it comes to that. But yeah, that was a great season. I love to see Biscuit and Baki fight, because it was honestly one of the fights I was looking forward to the most out of like the whole series, because I knew it would happen eventually. And it's cool to see Baki beat the second strongest man on Earth, who is just a little bit beneath Yujiro Hanma. So yeah, I am ready to see eventually the fight between Baki and Yujiro. I know it probably still hasn't even happened in the manga, but it'll happen one day, and I can't wait to see it when it does. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about season 2 of Baki Hanma, and all I really have for episode 80 of Show Review. So thank you very much for watching.